The river is quiet. The year is 1673, and two French explorers, Jacques Marquette and Louis Jolliet, are paddling the Mississippi, looking for signs of the great settlements they've heard rumored inland. They find nothing but flat water and forest. They ask the local tribes what lies to the east. No one knows. No one remembers. The land keeps its silence. What they cannot know, what no one alive at that moment knows, is that beneath the soil, less than a day's walk from where they drift, there are the foundations of a city. 120 earthen mounds, a pyramid so large its base dwarfs the footprint of the Great Pyramid of Giza. A solar calendar built from thousands of logs. Mass graves. A king buried on 20,000 shells. A wall built from 20,000 trees. This city once held more people than medieval London. It rose within what felt like a single generation. It traded across an entire continent, and then it vanished so completely that within 3 centuries, not a single person alive could remember its name. You don't know its name either. Almost no one does. That is the first mystery. Welcome back to Ruins Untold. I'm going to take you somewhere history decided you didn't need to know about. A city that rose on American soil, grew larger than medieval London, and vanished so completely that its name has been all but erased from memory. Today, we're digging up Cahokia. Stay with me. This one changes things. It is the year 800 CE. The land that will one day be called Illinois stretches flat and fertile between the bluffs of the Ozarks and the slow brown ribbon of the Mississippi. Here, in the region archaeologists call the American Bottom, a broad floodplain carved over millennia by the river's wandering, small farming villages dot the landscape. These are late woodland people. They grow corn and squash in garden plots. They hunt deer and fish the oxbow lakes. They trade modest quantities of goods with communities a few days' travel away. Their villages are small, a few dozen families, maybe a few hundred people at most. No monuments, no walls, no grid. This is the landscape for 200 years. The climate is working in their favor. The medieval warm period, the same warming trend that allowed Norse settlements to briefly flourish in Greenland, that boosted crop yields across Eurasia, is extending the growing season in North America's heartland. Maize, introduced to the region centuries earlier, is slowly becoming more productive, more central to daily life. The soil of the American Bottom, renewed by seasonal floods, is among the most fertile on the continent. The conditions are quietly building towards something, but there is no hint of what is coming. The people of the American Bottom in 900 CE have no idea they are living at the edge of a transformation that will dwarf anything their ancestors experienced. Their villages cluster near water. Their leaders, where leadership exists, hold authority through kinship and tradition, not monuments or armies. When they die, they are buried simply. Their dead do not require pyramids. None of this is primitive. These are sophisticated communities, deeply adapted to a specific landscape with their own cosmologies, their own trade relationships, their own ways of marking time and meaning. The woodland cultures stretching across eastern North America had been accumulating knowledge for centuries. They read the sky. They knew the seasons. They understood the river. What they lacked was a catalyst. Around 950 CE, something begins to shift. Agricultural production intensifies. Populations cluster more tightly. A few larger communities emerge at favorable locations along the river. The trading networks deepen. Shells from the Gulf Coast appear more frequently. Copper from the Great Lakes begins moving southward. Someone, somewhere, is accumulating the resources and the relationships that a city requires. The floodplain waits. And then, within the span of a single human lifetime, in what archaeologists will one day describe as an event with no precedent in the pre-Columbian history of North America, everything changes at once. The year is approximately 1050 CE. Within a generation, within living memory of people who were born into small farming villages, the American bottom has become a city. Not a large village, not a regional center, a city. Tens of thousands of people are converging on a 6-square-mile stretch of floodplain. They are coming from the north and the south and the east, drawn by something, an idea, a leader, a vision, a god that we cannot name because the people who built this city left no written records and their language died with them. What they built is staggering. Monk's Mound rises at the center of the urban core, a platform pyramid of packed earth 100 feet tall, 1,000 feet long, 775 feet wide. Its base is larger than the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Every cubic foot of it, and there are 22 million cubic feet, was carried by human hands in baskets, one load at a time. No wheels, no draft animals, no machinery. Just people and time, and a shared intention so powerful it moved the equivalent of a small mountain. Around it, 50 acres of land are deliberately leveled and packed into a grand plaza, an engineering project with no known precedent on this continent. The math alone is almost incomprehensible. To flatten 50 acres of river floodplain by hand requires moving enough earth to fill tens of thousands of dump trucks, then compacting every square inch into a surface flat enough to function as a ceremonial stage for an entire city. 120 mounds surround the core, each serving a different function: residential platforms, burial sites, ceremonial stages. A timber circle, later named Woodhenge, rises to the west, a ring of massive red cedar posts aligned to mark the solstices and equinoxes. The posts are positioned with a precision that required serious astronomical knowledge. On the morning of the spring equinox, an observer standing at the circle's center would watch the sun rise directly over the peak of Monk's Mound. This city knew the sky. It was built in conversation with it. And around 1100 CE, at its peak, the urban core holds an estimated 10,000 to 20,000 people. The broader metropolitan region, surrounding towns, agricultural zones, satellite communities, may have reached 50,000 or more. At this exact same moment across the Atlantic Ocean, the city of London holds somewhere between 10,000 and 18,000 people. Let that settle. A city on the American continent, built by a people whose name we do not know, speaking a language that is entirely lost, was, by population and by sophistication, comparable to medieval London. And almost no American schoolchild has ever heard of it. Then there is Mound 72. Excavated by archaeologist Melvin Fowler in the late 1960s, Mound 72 contains the remains of at least 270 individuals. Among them, mass graves of young women between the ages of 18 and 23, selected for their age, buried in deliberate layers. And at the center of the mound, something that stopped the excavation team cold. A single man, laid to rest on a platform made of 20,000 marine shell beads, arranged in the precise shape of a falcon, or a thunderbird, spanning several feet beneath his body. 20,000 shells, the largest cache of shell beads ever recovered in North America, placed by hand, arranged with purpose, beneath a man we cannot name. We do not know who he was. We do not know his title, his language, or what his people called him. We know only that when he died, 250 others were placed in the earth around him, and that his burial is of such astonishing, deliberate beauty that it took the excavation team weeks to comprehend what they were looking at. He was the most powerful person in the most powerful city in North America at the time of his death. History has forgotten his name entirely. Mainstream archaeology has worked for decades to understand Cahokia, and it has produced serious, credible answers. Answers that deserve to be heard before harder questions are asked. On the founding, the scholarly consensus holds that Cahokia's dramatic rise around 1050 CE resulted from converging favorable conditions. The medieval warm period extended the growing season. Maize intensification generated agricultural surpluses that could support a non-farming population for the first time. Charismatic leadership attracted migrants from across the region. A coordinated construction program, likely organized around a Mississippian cosmological vision, pulled communities together around a shared project. Timothy Pocketat, the leading archaeologist of Cahokia at the University of Illinois, describes the founding as something close to a deliberate act, less a city that grew organically and more a city that was decided. In his view, Cahokia represents a conscious political and religious innovation, a new kind of social order, willed into existence by people who understood what they were doing. On Mound 72 and the ritual system. Archaeology places the burials within a world renewal cosmological framework common to Mississippian cultures across the eastern continent. The sacrificed individuals, primarily young women, are interpreted as retainers or sacred offerings accompanying a high-status leader into the afterlife, a pattern with parallels in complex societies from Egypt to China to the Andes. The shell bead burial figure, sometimes called the Birdman by researchers, likely held both political and religious authority. His power in this reading was expressed through control of sacred knowledge, astronomical ritual, and the spectacular demonstration of what he could command in death. On the abandonment. The mainstream explanation involves multiple interlocking stressors. Paleoclimate records, including tree ring data from the region, document extended drought beginning in the late 12th century. Deforestation, driven in part by the 20,000 logs required for the palisade wall alone, degraded the surrounding ecosystem, causing erosion, soil exhaustion, and increased flood risk. Agricultural yields declined. Political authority weakened. The palisade itself, rebuilt at least 4 times over the city's lifespan, suggests not a single crisis, but a chronic, grinding pressure that the city's institutions ultimately could not contain. Slowly, over roughly 150 years, the population dispersed, north, east, south. The mounds were left behind. The forest took them back. This explanation is coherent. It is supported by physical evidence. It is probably partially correct. But there is one thing it cannot explain. When tens of thousands of people scatter across a continent, they carry their stories with them. Their children carry those stories. Their grandchildren carry them. But when Marquette and Jolliet drifted past in 1673, no living tribe, not one, retained a memory of the city that had stood a few miles from the riverbank. A civilization of this scale, this complexity, this ambition left no oral tradition, no legend, no echo. That kind of silence is not natural. That kind of silence requires an explanation. Here is what the archaeological evidence shows when examined without assumptions about what a pre-Columbian city is supposed to look like. Cahokia was not built randomly. Its layout was not opportunistic. Monk's Mound sits on a precise north-south axis. The Grand Plaza aligns with it. Woodhenge marks the solar equinox against the peak of Monk's Mound with astronomical precision. When researchers began mapping the full urban footprint using LiDAR, a technology capable of seeing buried structure through ground cover and centuries of sedimentation, what emerged was a city grid oriented to cardinal and solar axes across its entire extent. Some researchers argue this is not coincidence. They argue that whoever designed Cahokia was working from a cosmological template, that the city was built as a physical expression of a worldview in which the arrangement of the earth mirrored the arrangement of the sky. The city was, in this reading, a ritual object as much as a settlement. Every mound placed, every alignment set, every plaza leveled, was part of a total design that preceded the first basket of earth being lifted. If that's correct, the founding of Cahokia was not gradual. It was a planned act of creation. Somebody, or some group of people, arrived on the American bottom with a blueprint and the authority to execute it. And within a generation, that blueprint stood 100 feet tall. Consider the scale of that authority. The construction of Monk's Mound alone required coordinated labor from thousands of people sustained across decades. The Grand Plaza required moving earth on a near-industrial scale. These are not projects that emerge organically from a community going about its business. They require a central vision and a population willing to subordinate everything to that vision. What idea was powerful enough to do that? What belief about the nature of the world, about what the gods demanded, about what a city built in the image of the cosmos would make possible? What promise could mobilize tens of thousands of people to build a pyramid by hand? We don't know. Because the people who believed it left no writing. And when they left, the belief left with them. Then there is the question that indigenous scholars have been raising with increasing urgency, and that mainstream American history has been very slow to take seriously. Why don't we know about this? Cahokia is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It receives fewer than 300,000 visitors per year. Stonehenge, a remarkable but far smaller site, receives more than 1 million. The vast majority of American school children complete their entire education without encountering the word Cahokia. It is absent from standard curricula. It appears in few textbooks. There is no popular film about it. There is no national monument at the scale its significance demands. The reason most often cited is curriculum space. There's simply not enough room. But critics, including indigenous scholars and historians of colonialism, offer a different explanation, and it is worth hearing in full. The myth of the empty continent. The foundational idea that North America before Columbus was sparsely populated by small, nomadic bands who had built nothing of consequence is not just a historical error. It is a structural narrative, one that justified conquest, dispossession, and the transformation of an already inhabited land into a wilderness available for settlement. That narrative requires a certain kind of pre-Columbian North America. And a city comparable to medieval London, with a pyramid base larger than the Great Pyramids, connected to trade networks spanning the entire continent, does not fit. And so, Interstate 55 was routed directly through the archaeological zone. Suburban development consumed dozens of mounds before protection efforts began. The Ramey Mound, one of Cahokia's major secondary mounds, was bulldozed for a housing development. and Cahokia stayed out of the textbooks. That is not an oversight. That is a choice. And choices made about what history gets remembered and what history gets buried are always made by someone with something at stake in the answer. Cahokia is not an isolated anomaly. That is the most important thing to understand about it. The Mississippian culture, the broader civilization of which Cahokia was the apex, extended across the entire eastern half of North America, from the Gulf Coast to the Great Lakes, from the Atlantic seaboard to the edge of the Great Plains. Hundreds of mound sites exist across this landscape. Some are enormous. Many remain unexcavated. More were destroyed before anyone thought to look carefully. Cahokia's influence spread not through military conquest. There is no evidence of a Cahokian army, but through culture. Consider the chunky game, a sport played with a polished stone disc and throwing poles. It originated at Cahokia and radiated outward across the entire continent. Centuries after the city fell silent, people in communities that had never seen the Mississippi were still playing chunky. The game was a living artifact of a dead civilization, carrying its cultural signature forward through time, even after every building was gone and every name was forgotten. The pattern Cahokia represents, a sophisticated, large-scale indigenous civilization that mainstream American history has systematically minimized, is not unique. Poverty Point in Louisiana was built 3,500 years ago, an earthwork site representing engineering achievements comparable to those of the ancient Near East at the same period. The astronomical alignments of the Hopewell mound builders, the urban planning evident at Cahokia, the continental trade networks of the Mississippian world, these represent intellectual and organizational capabilities that the dominant historical narrative has never been fully comfortable acknowledging. The question worth sitting with is this: if we got Cahokia this wrong, if a city comparable to medieval London could be essentially erased from popular consciousness in the nation built literally on top of it, what else did we get wrong? How many other cities, how many other civilizations, how many other names and languages and cosmologies have been buried under the same comfortable myths? The mounds are still there. They haven't moved. For a very long time, we simply chose not to look. Return to the river. It is still 1673. Marquette and Jolliet drift south on the Mississippi, and the land offers them nothing. No story, no memory. The city has been gone for 300 years, and already the silence is complete. Somewhere to the east, Monk's Mound still rises above the floodplain. It stood when the French built their trading posts. It stood when the Americans arrived. It stood when the Interstate was laid around it and the strip malls climbed toward its base. It stands now. It will stand after all of this is gone. But the man on the shell beads, the Birdman, the nameless king buried on 20,000 shells with 250 of his people arranged around him in the dark, his name is nowhere. The city he ruled is nowhere. The language he spoke, the God he served, the idea so powerful it moved a mountain by hand, nowhere. We are left with the mounds. And the question of what a civilization chooses to remember and what it decides is safer to forget. Cahokia was real. It was here. And for a little while, it was the greatest city in the Western Hemisphere. Someone should have told you that a long time ago. Here's what I want you to tell me in the comments. If Cahokia had been discovered in Europe, if this pyramid, this city, this buried king and his shell-bead throne had been found anywhere else on Earth, do you think we would know its name by now? Think about that and tell me what you come up with. If you want to keep finding the history that didn't make it into the textbooks, subscribe, because we are just getting started. Next time, we're going to a place on a different continent where the same questions keep surfacing. Who built it? Why is it being ignored? And what does the silence mean? See you there.